September 12, 1944, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. 06:15 hours. The morning fog clung to the pine trees like wet wool as Obergefreiter Klaus Weber pressed his body into the frozen earth. His Karabiner 98K bolt-action rifle felt heavy in his hands, not from its weight, but from what it represented. 5 rounds, that's all the magazine held. 5 careful shots before he'd need to reload. Across the forest clearing, perhaps 150 meters away, he could hear the Americans advancing, their boots crunching through fallen leaves, their voices speaking that strange, casual English that sounded nothing like the harsh commands of the Wehrmacht. Weber had been fighting since Poland in 1939. He'd faced Polish cavalry, French infantry, and Soviet soldiers who attacked in human waves. He knew how firefights worked. You aimed carefully, you made each shot count. You worked the bolt between rounds with practiced efficiency. But nothing in 5 years of combat had prepared him for what happened next. The first shot came so fast he almost missed it. Then another, and another. A continuous cascade of rifle fire that didn't pause, didn't hesitate, didn't stop to work a bolt action. In the time it took Weber to chamber his second round, the American riflemen across the clearing had fired 6. Then came the sound that would haunt German soldiers for the rest of the war. Ping. That distinctive metallic ring of an M1 Garand ejecting its empty 8-round clip. It meant the American had just fired 8 rounds in less time than Weber could fire 3. And it meant he was reloading, faster than any bolt-action rifle in the world. Weber's squad leader, a veteran of Stalingrad, shouted the warning that would echo through German positions from Normandy to Berlin. Amerikanische Selbstladegewehr, take cover! But cover wouldn't save them. The mathematics of firepower had shifted. The Americans had brought a weapon to the European theater that would redefine infantry combat. A rifle so effective that even German generals would later admit that it was the finest battle implement ever created. This is the story of how a semi-automatic rifle designed by a Canadian immigrant transformed American infantry into the most lethal fighting force in history. How German soldiers learned to fear a sound, that 8-round ping, more than artillery, and how the United States mass-produced 6 million of these weapons while Germany still equipped its army with rifles designed in 1898. The Wehrmacht had laughed at American industrial weapons, called them wasteful, inefficient, typical of American excess. But by the time Klaus Weber heard that first ping in the Hürtgen Forest, it was already too late. The M1 Garand had changed everything.
To understand why the M1 Garand shocked German infantry, you must first understand what they expected to face. The standard German infantry rifle in 1944 was the Karabiner 98K, a shortened version of the Gewehr 98 designed in 1898, nearly half a century earlier. This wasn't because German engineers lacked innovation. It was because German military doctrine emphasized marksmanship, fire discipline, and the belief that soldiers should aim carefully rather than waste ammunition. The Kar 98K was an excellent rifle by the standards of its era, accurate to 500 meters, reliable in the mud of Russia and the sand of North Africa, simple enough that a conscript could field strip it blindfolded. It held 5 rounds in an internal magazine, loaded via stripper clips. But it was a bolt-action rifle. After each shot, the soldier had to manually work the bolt, pull it up, pull it back, push it forward, push it down, before firing again. In trained hands, a German soldier could fire 15 rounds per minute. Expert marksmen might achieve 20. This was doctrine. German infantry tactics assumed that controlled, aimed fire would defeat mass attacks. Machine guns provided sustained fire. Rifles provided precision. Together, they created the tactical system that had conquered most of Europe. German military intelligence knew the Americans were developing semi-automatic rifles. They'd captured reports about the M1 Garand as early as 1940, but Wehrmacht analysts dismissed it for three reasons that seemed logical at the time. First, semi-automatic rifles wasted ammunition. German doctrine allocated 60 rounds per rifle per day. A soldier with a semi-automatic weapon would exhaust his ammunition quickly through undisciplined rapid fire. Then he'd be useless. Second, semi-automatic rifles were mechanically complex. More parts meant more breakdowns. In the harsh conditions of combat, mud, sand, extreme cold, simple bolt-action rifles would prove more reliable. Third, the Americans couldn't possibly produce enough semi-automatic rifles to equip their entire army. Germany had experimented with semi-automatic designs like the Gewehr 41 and later the Gewehr 43, but found them too expensive and complex for mass production. Surely the Americans faced the same limitations. All three assumptions were catastrophically wrong. But in 1941, as America entered the war, German soldiers had no reason to doubt their doctrine. The Kar 98K had served them well from Poland to the gates of Moscow. Why would they fear an American rifle they'd never faced? Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding a reconnaissance battalion in North Africa, wrote in his diary in 1942, "Intelligence reports claim the Americans have issued automatic rifles to every infantryman. This seems unlikely. Such weapons would be specialty items, perhaps for elite units. Our soldiers need not concern themselves with American equipment. They should concern themselves with American artillery, which is considerable." Von Luck was right about American artillery, but he was dead wrong about American rifles. By 1943, the United States had already produced over 2 million M1 Garands. By war's end, that number would exceed 6 million. Every single American infantryman, from the greenest recruit to General Eisenhower himself, was issued this semi-automatic weapon. The Germans didn't just underestimate American production. They fundamentally misunderstood how industrial democracy waged war.
The M1 Garand was born from failure. After World War I, the United States Army recognized a critical deficiency. American soldiers armed with bolt-action Springfield rifles had faced German infantry equipped with some semi-automatic weapons and found themselves outgunned in close combat. The solution seemed obvious: develop a semi-automatic rifle for the entire infantry. But developing it and producing it in quantity were very different challenges. John Garand was a Canadian-born firearms designer working at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. A quiet, methodical engineer who'd immigrated to the United States as a child, Garand had been working on semi-automatic rifle designs since 1919. His challenge was enormous. The rifle had to be reliable in all weather conditions, from Pacific jungles to Arctic winters, accurate to at least 500 yards, simple enough for conscripts to maintain with minimal training, durable enough to survive combat abuse, capable of sustained fire without overheating, and, most importantly, manufacturable in quantities of millions using existing American industrial capacity. Garand went through multiple prototypes. Early designs used complicated gas systems that failed in dusty conditions. Some were too heavy. Others required specialized ammunition that complicated logistics. The Army tested and rejected design after design. Then, in 1932, Garand developed a rotating bolt system that used gas pressure from firing to automatically cycle the action. The rifle fed from an 8-round en-bloc clip, a self-contained unit that inserted from the top. When the last round fired, the empty clip ejected automatically with that distinctive ping sound, and the bolt locked open, ready for immediate reloading. After years of testing, thousands of rounds fired in rain, snow, mud, sand, and dust, the Army officially adopted the M1 Garand on January 9, 1936. It became the first semi-automatic rifle to be standard issue for any military in the world. The specifications were impressive. Weight, 9.5 pounds unloaded. Length, 43.6 inches. Caliber, .30-06 Springfield, a powerful cartridge capable of stopping a man at 800 yards. Rate of fire, 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute, tripled the rate of bolt-action rifles. Magazine capacity, 8 rounds in en-bloc clip. Effective range, 500 yards, with accuracy to 800. But specifications on paper didn't reflect combat effectiveness. That would only become clear when American soldiers faced enemy infantry. Production began slowly. In 1937, Springfield Armory produced just 100 rifles. In 1938, fewer than 2,000. The rifle was complex to manufacture, requiring precision machining of multiple components. Each rifle cost approximately $85, expensive compared to $20 for a bolt-action Springfield. Then, Pearl Harbor changed everything. American industrial capacity, which had been producing consumer goods, automobiles, refrigerators, radios, pivoted to war production with stunning speed. Winchester Repeating Arms Company was contracted to produce M1 Garands. So was International Harvester, a farm equipment manufacturer. By 1943, American factories were producing 4,000 M1 Garands every single day. The production lines ran 24 hours, 3 shifts, 7 days a week. Women who'd never touched a rifle before the war now operated precision machinery that produced components to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. The cost per rifle dropped to $85, then to $65 as production techniques improved. America was producing a technologically superior weapon for less than Germany spent on inferior bolt-action rifles. German intelligence obtained a captured M1 Garand in North Africa in late 1942. The rifle was shipped to the Heereswaffenamt, the Army Weapons Office, for evaluation. The German report discovered after the war was sobering. The American M1 rifle represents a significant advancement in infantry weapons. Its semi-automatic action provides approximately 3 times the effective rate of fire of comparable bolt-action rifles. The en-bloc clip system seems elegant and reliable. The rifle is well manufactured with excellent tolerances. However, we note several concerns. The en-bloc clip system seems prone to damage. The rifle is heavier than our Kar 98K. It requires more maintenance. Most significantly, such rapid fire will cause American soldiers to exhaust their ammunition quickly, making them vulnerable. Recommendation: monitor American rifle development, but do not prioritize countermeasures. Our current weapons remain adequate. That last sentence would prove tragically wrong for German infantry.
June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy. The first large-scale encounter between German defenders and Americans armed with M1 Garands occurred in the worst possible circumstances. American infantry, pinned on the beach under withering fire from prepared defensive positions, needed every advantage they could get. Obergefreiter Franz Gockel, defending a bunker overlooking Easy Red Sector, had been told the Americans were poorly trained, soft. Their equipment was inferior. They would break under sustained fire. In a letter to his family written 3 days after D-Day, recovered from his body after he was killed, Gockel wrote, "Everything we were told about the Americans was wrong. Their soldiers fight with determination. But more concerning is their weapons. They have rifles that fire continuously. Our Kar 98K requires us to work the bolt after each shot. In the time I fire twice, an American fires 8 or 10 times. We cannot maintain fire superiority." This disparity became catastrophically apparent once American forces broke through the beach defenses. At Point du Hoc, Rangers armed with M1 Garands engaged German positions at close range.
The semi-automatic rifles allowed Rangers to maintain suppressing fire while advancing, something impossible with bolt-action weapons. One Ranger could deliver the same firepower as 3 German soldiers. Sergeant Leonard Lommel, who led the assault on the German gun emplacements at Pointe du Hoc, later recalled, "The M1 gave us a huge advantage in close combat. I could fire 8 rounds as fast as I could pull the trigger. The Germans had to work their bolts between shots. In a close-range firefight, that difference meant life or death. Our squad could put out more fire than an entire German platoon." The mathematics of firepower had shifted decisively. A standard American rifle company in 1944 consisted of approximately 190 men, with about 150 carrying M1 Garands. At maximum rate of fire, those 150 riflemen could deliver 7,500 rounds per minute, 125 rounds per second. A comparable German infantry company, equipped primarily with Kar 98K rifles and supplemented by machine guns, could deliver approximately 3,000 rounds per minute from rifles. The machine guns compensated to some degree, but German doctrine hadn't anticipated facing opponents with such overwhelming rifle firepower. German after-action reports from Normandy consistently noted American fire superiority. A report from the 352nd Infantry Division, which defended Omaha Beach, stated, "Enemy infantry demonstrates firepower disproportionate to unit size. Estimate indicates individual American soldiers fire 3 times as many rounds as our soldiers in comparable engagements. This provides them tactical flexibility our forces cannot match. Small American units can fix larger German units in place through superior sustained fire." But the true psychological impact came from the sound. That ping. When an M1 Garand's clip ejected after firing the 8th round, it made an unmistakable metallic ringing sound. German soldiers learned to listen for it, because it meant the American rifleman was momentarily reloading. In theory, this created a 2-second vulnerability window. Some German veterans claimed they learned to count shots and attack when they heard the ping. This became something of a myth after the war, the idea that the M1's ejection sound was a tactical weakness. The reality was different. First, in the chaos of combat, counting individual shots from multiple rifles while under fire was nearly impossible. Second, even when an American soldier was reloading, his squad mates were still firing. Third, reloading an M1 took approximately 2 seconds for a trained soldier, far faster than reloading a Kar 98K via stripper clip, which took 5 to 7 seconds. Gefreiter Otto Reinhardt, captured in Normandy, told interrogators, "We were told to listen for the clip ejection and attack then. This is nonsense. By the time you hear it and react, the American has reloaded and 2 others are still shooting at you. The ping didn't help us. It mocked us. It meant 8 rounds had just been fired at our positions." To truly understand the M1 Garand's dominance, we must examine the technical specifications that made it revolutionary. The heart of the M1 was its gas-operated system. When fired, expanding gas from the burning powder pushed the bullet down the barrel. A small amount of gas was diverted through a port near the muzzle into a gas cylinder beneath the barrel. This gas pressure pushed a piston, which rotated and unlocked the bolt, extracted the spent cartridge, and chambered a fresh round, all in a fraction of a second. The entire cycle, from trigger pull to ready to fire again, took approximately 0.12 seconds. The shooter never moved his hand from the trigger or disrupted his sight picture. By contrast, working the bolt on a K98K required lifting the bolt handle, 0.3 seconds, pulling the bolt back to extract the cartridge, 0.4 seconds, pushing the bolt forward to chamber a new round, 0.4 seconds, rotating the bolt handle down to lock, 0.3 seconds. Total time, approximately 1.4 seconds for a trained soldier, longer under stress or in awkward positions. This meant that in a 10-second engagement, an American soldier with an M1 could fire 8 aimed shots in approximately 4 seconds, reload in 2 seconds, and fire 4 more shots. Total, 12 rounds. A German soldier with a K98K could fire 5 rounds in approximately 7 seconds, reload in 6 seconds, but that's 13 seconds, so he actually only manages 5 rounds in a 10-second window. The American delivered 140% more rounds on target in the same time period. But rate of fire wasn't the only advantage. The M1 Garand was remarkably accurate. The rotating bolt locked up tight with each shot, providing consistent accuracy. The barrel was chrome-lined, preventing erosion from thousands of rounds. The sights were adjustable for range and windage. In U.S. Army testing, an average soldier could hit a man-sized target at 300 yards with the M1 Garand 85% of the time. At 500 yards, the hit rate dropped to 50%. Expert marksmen achieved hits at 800 yards. The German K98K was also accurate. German marksmen were famously skilled, but accuracy means nothing if you can't deliver enough rounds quickly enough. The 30-06 Springfield cartridge fired by the M1 delivered serious stopping power. The 150-grain bullet traveled at 2,800 feet per second, carrying 2,600 foot-pounds of energy. At 500 yards, it could penetrate a steel helmet or light cover. German soldiers learned that cover which stopped K98K rounds might not stop M1 fire, simply because Americans could pour so many more rounds into the same spot. The en-bloc clip system, while unusual, proved remarkably efficient in practice. The 8-round clip inserted from the top, pushed down until it locked with a distinctive click. When the last round fired, the empty clip automatically ejected and the bolt locked open, a clear visual and audible signal to reload immediately. Reloading was simple. Press a fresh clip down into the open receiver. The bolt released automatically, chambering the first round. Time: 2 seconds for a trained soldier, 1.5 seconds for veterans. Compare this to reloading a K98K. Open the bolt, insert a 5-round stripper clip into the guide, push rounds down with thumb pressure, remove stripper clip, close bolt. Time: 5 to 7 seconds minimum. The M1 system was so efficient that American soldiers typically carried 8 clips, 64 rounds in specially designed pouches on their cartridge belts. Experienced troops could reload without looking, by feel alone, even in darkness. German commanders who studied captured M1 Garands recognized its technical superiority, but assumed its complexity would lead to reliability problems. They were wrong again. The M1 Garand proved extraordinarily reliable across every theater of war. In the deserts of North Africa, where sand destroys most precision mechanisms, the M1 continued functioning with basic maintenance. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, where lubricants froze and bolts stuck, soldiers learned to operate the M1 dry, without lubricant, and it still worked. In the Pacific jungles, where humidity and moisture ruined weapons within days, the M1's chrome-lined barrel and robust construction proved superior to every other rifle in theater. Sergeant John Basilone, who received the Medal of Honor for actions at Guadalcanal, reportedly fired his M1 so many rounds in a single engagement that the wooden handguard began smoking. The rifle continued functioning. German weapons designers studied the M1 intensely. They developed the Gewehr 43, a semi-automatic rifle intended to counter the American advantage. But the G43 was complicated, expensive, and only about 400,000 of them were produced during the entire war, compared to 6 million M1 Garands. Most German soldiers fought the entire war with bolt-action rifles, facing an enemy where every single infantryman had semi-automatic firepower.
The true measure of any weapon is combat effectiveness. By this standard, the M1 Garand was revolutionary. After-action reports from the European and Pacific theaters consistently showed American rifle companies achieving fire superiority over larger German or Japanese units. The M1 was the primary reason. In the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, American units defending Bastogne faced overwhelming German forces. Outnumbered, low on ammunition, surrounded, the 101st Airborne Division should have been destroyed. But American paratroopers, armed with M1 Garands, held defensive positions against repeated German assaults. The semi-automatic rifles allowed small numbers of defenders to deliver sustained fire that German attackers couldn't match. Private First Class Richard Winters, leading a platoon from Easy Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, later wrote, "We were outnumbered 3-1, but each of our men could fire as fast as 3 Germans. That evened the odds. When the Germans came across that field, we put down such a volume of fire that their attack stalled. Not because we were better soldiers, but because we had better weapons." German commanders noted this phenomenon repeatedly. General Major Heinz Kokott, commanding the 26th Volksgrenadier Division at Bastogne, reported, "American defensive positions cannot be assaulted frontally without prohibitive casualties. Their rifle fire creates kill zones that cannot be crossed. We require artillery preparation and armored support for attacks that infantry alone could accomplish against Soviet or British positions." This wasn't German weakness. This was American firepower dominance. The M1's effectiveness showed most clearly in urban combat, where engagement ranges were short and firefights were sudden and violent. In the Battle for Aachen, October 1944, American infantry fought house to house against determined German defenders. The M1 Garand's rapid-fire capability proved decisive. Staff Sergeant Bill Wiedefer described clearing a building. "You kick in a door and you've got maybe 1 second to assess and fire. With the M1, I could put 3 rounds center mass before a German could work his bolt once. In close quarters, that split-second advantage meant survival. Every building we cleared, we were thankful for that rifle." German soldiers defending in buildings had the advantage of prepared positions. They could aim at doorways, windows, stairwells. But when American infantry breached into rooms, the M1's rapid fire overwhelmed defensive advantages. The psychological impact was equally important. German soldiers under M1 fire consistently reported feeling suppressed, pinned down, unable to return effective fire. The volume of incoming rounds created a psychological pressure that bolt-action weapons couldn't replicate. A captured German lieutenant, interviewed in January 1945, explained, "When Americans attack, the rifle fire is continuous. You cannot raise your head to aim. You cannot move to a better position. You can only wait and hope they run out of ammunition. But they never seem to. They just keep firing. It's like facing machine gun fire from every direction." This suppressive effect was intentional in American tactical doctrine. Units were trained to use overwhelming rifle fire to fix enemy positions, allowing maneuver elements to flank. The M1 made this doctrine practical. Compare this to German tactics, which relied on machine guns for suppression while riflemen maneuvered. When American infantry could suppress with rifles alone, it disrupted the entire German tactical system. In the Pacific theater, the M1 Garand proved equally dominant against Japanese forces. Japanese infantry tactics emphasized close assault, infiltration, and nighttime attacks. Their standard rifle, the Arisaka Type 99, was a bolt-action weapon similar in concept to the Kar 98K. When Japanese soldiers launched banzai charges, massed infantry assaults intended to overwhelm defenders through shock and numbers, they expected to close distance before defenders could fire enough rounds to stop them. The M1 Garand changed that calculation completely. At Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Iwo Jima, American Marines armed with M1 Garands delivered such devastating firepower that Japanese charges were cut down before reaching American lines. Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, commanding the 1st Marine Regiment at Guadalcanal, observed, "The Japanese tactics worked against bolt-action rifles. They calculated they could cross the killing zone before defenders reloaded. With the Garand, we could fire 40 to 50 rounds per minute per man. A platoon of Marines could stop a company-sized banzai charge. The Japanese never adapted to this reality." Japanese after-action reports, translated after the war, consistently noted American rifle firepower as a critical factor in their defeats. A report from the 29th Infantry Division, destroyed at Saipan, stated, "Enemy infantry possesses semi-automatic rifles that fire continuously without reloading. Our soldiers cannot close distance for assault. recommend development of counter-tactics or similar weapons. Japan attempted to develop semi-automatic rifles but lacked the industrial capacity. By 1945, Japanese soldiers were being issued bamboo spears, while Americans carried M1 Garands.
German military leadership wasn't blind to the M1 Garand's effectiveness. As combat reports accumulated through 1943 and 1944, the Heereswaffenamt recognized they faced a serious problem. The German response came in three forms: tactical adaptation, weapons development, and propaganda. Tactically, German infantry units began emphasizing rapid maneuver and close assault to negate American firepower advantages. If Germans could close distance quickly and engage in hand-to-hand combat, the M1's fire rate mattered less. This rarely worked. American squads were trained to maintain spacing and mutual support, specifically to prevent close assault. And even in close quarters, the M1's semi-automatic action provided advantages. German units also increased reliance on machine guns and automatic weapons. The MG-42 machine gun, with its incredible 1,200 rounds per minute rate of fire, could suppress American positions. But this made German squads dependent on their machine gunners. When the MG-42 was knocked out, the squad's firepower dropped dramatically. In weapons development, Germany had been working on semi-automatic rifles since before the war. The Gewehr 41, developed in 1941, was Germany's first attempt at a semi-automatic infantry rifle. It was a disaster. The G41 was heavy, unreliable, and complicated. The gas system fouled quickly. It jammed in dusty conditions. Soldiers who received G41s often discarded them for captured Soviet rifles or went back to Kar 98Ks. The Gewehr 43, introduced in 1943, was an improvement. Based partially on the Soviet SVT-40 design, the G43 was more reliable and easier to produce, but it still required skilled manufacturing that Germany's war economy couldn't support at scale. Total G43 production? Approximately 400,000 rifles. Total M1 Garand production? Over 6 million rifles. Most German soldiers never saw a G43. They fought the entire war with bolt-action Kar 98Ks, facing Americans who all carried M1 Garands. Even the G43, when it reached troops, wasn't equal to the M1. It was less reliable, less accurate at range, and required more maintenance. German soldiers who had captured and used M1 Garands consistently preferred the American rifle. Obergefreiter Hans Schmidt, who used both weapons, wrote, "The American Garand is a superior weapon to our G43 in every way. It's more reliable, more accurate, simpler to maintain. If I could choose any rifle, I would choose the Garand. But we must use what we have." The third German response was propaganda. Since they couldn't match American rifle firepower, German military publications emphasized other factors: German tactical superiority, better training, stronger morale. Articles in Wehrmacht training manuals claimed the M1 Garand wasted ammunition, was unreliable, and that American soldiers depended on firepower because they lacked tactical skill. This propaganda may have sustained morale, but it didn't change battlefield reality. When German infantry faced American infantry, the side with M1 Garands won firefights more often. By late 1944, German military effectiveness had degraded severely. Veteran units had been destroyed, replacements received minimal training, equipment shortages were critical. But even veteran German units with adequate equipment couldn't overcome the firepower disparity. Oberst Hans von Luck, now commanding a Panzer regiment in Normandy, wrote in August 1944, "American infantry has achieved fire superiority through their semi-automatic rifles. We cannot match this with our bolt-action weapons. In infantry engagements without armored or artillery support, we are consistently outgunned. Our soldiers fight bravely, but bravery cannot overcome such material disadvantage." The most damning admission came from German generals after the war. When asked what American weapons they feared most, many cited the M1 Garand alongside artillery and aircraft. General Major Fritz Bayerlen, who commanded the Panzerlehr Division, stated in a post-war interview, "The American semi-automatic rifle was a tremendous advantage. In an infantry firefight, Americans could fire 3 times as many rounds. This meant our soldiers had to be 3 times as skilled to achieve parity. They rarely were. The Garand was perhaps the single most effective infantry weapon of the war."
As Allied forces pushed into Germany in early 1945, German soldiers surrendering often asked to keep their weapons as souvenirs, as was sometimes permitted. But increasingly, Germans wanted to surrender their Kar-98s and take American M1 Garands instead. This wasn't officially allowed, but it happened informally. German POWs working for American units were sometimes armed with M1s for security duties. Former Wehrmacht soldiers later recalled these as the finest rifles they'd ever used. The M1 Garand's reputation spread beyond those who carried it. After Germany's surrender, captured German documents revealed the respect, even fear, that Wehrmacht leaders held for the weapon. A German training document from March 1945, titled Tactical Considerations When Facing American Infantry, devoted 2 pages to the M1 Garand. The enemy's semi-automatic rifle provides overwhelming firepower advantage at squad and platoon level. Frontal assault against prepared American positions is not advised without artillery preparation. The American soldier can sustain continuous fire that our soldiers cannot match. All tactics must account for this disparity. This was an extraordinary admission. The Wehrmacht, which had conquered most of Europe, officially acknowledged that in infantry combat, Americans held an insurmountable advantage. General George S. Patton, who commanded the U.S. Third Army, famously called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. This wasn't just American pride, it was accurate assessment. No other weapon in World War II combined reliability, accuracy, firepower, and mass production like the M1 Garand. The Germans had excellent machine guns, the Soviets had massed artillery. The British had strong tanks, but the Americans gave every single infantryman a weapon that was individually superior to what any other nation issued. The statistics tell the story. M1 Garands produced 6,275,767. Rate of fire advantage 3x over bolt-action rifles. Reliability rating 98% operational in field conditions. Combat effectiveness, American rifle companies consistently achieved fire superiority over larger enemy units. Production cost declined from $85 to $65 per unit through mass production. But beyond statistics, the M1 Garand represented something more fundamental about American industrial warfare. It proved that democratic societies could design, produce, and field superior weapons at scale. The Soviet Union had excellent engineers, but produced weapons that were simple and crude, prioritizing quantity. Germany had excellent engineers who produced weapons that were complex and expensive, limiting quantity. America found the balance. Weapons that were sophisticated enough to provide tactical advantage, but simple enough for mass production. The M1 remained in American service long after World War II. It served through the Korean War, where it again proved superior to Soviet and Chinese bolt-action rifles. Modified versions saw service into the 1960s. Even today, civilian versions of the M1 Garand are prized by collectors and competitive shooters. The civilian marksmanship program still sells refurbished M1s to qualified Americans. More than 80 years after its introduction, the design remains sound. Modern military historians consistently rank the M1 Garand among the most influential weapons of the 20th century. Not because it was perfect, the 8-round capacity was limiting, and the in-block clip system seemed outdated even in the 1940s, but because it proved a fundamental principle. In infantry combat, sustained firepower wins firefights. The Germans learned this lesson slowly, painfully through thousands of encounters where their well-trained, experienced soldiers were outgunned by American teenagers carrying M1 Garands. By the time Klaus Weber heard that first ping in the Hürtgen Forest in September 1944, the lesson was already being written in the casualty reports from Normandy, from the Bulge, from every battlefield where German bolt-action rifles faced American semi-automatic fire. The M1 Garand didn't win the war alone. American victory came from combined arms, overwhelming industrial production, superior logistics, and the courage of millions of soldiers. But in the fundamental transaction of infantry combat, rifleman versus rifleman, the M1 Garand provided an advantage that German soldiers never overcame. That metallic ping of an ejecting clip became the sound of inevitability. Not because it signaled vulnerability, as German propaganda claimed, but because it meant 8 rounds had just been fired in less than 5 seconds. It meant the American soldier was reloading and would be ready to fire again in 2 more seconds. It meant that in the basic arithmetic of small arms combat, the Americans had multiplied their firepower by 3. German infantry never expected that a single rifle design could dominate every firefight. They believed their superior training, their tactical experience, and their legendary discipline would overcome any weapon disadvantage. They were wrong. The M1 Garand proved that in modern war, technology and industrial capacity matter as much as training and courage. It proved that democracy could innovate, produce, and deploy superior weapons faster than authoritarian systems. And it proved that sometimes the difference between victory and defeat comes down to how fast you can pull a trigger. Klaus Weber survived the war. He surrendered to American forces in April 1945, handed over his Kar 98, and spent 2 years as a prisoner of war in the United States. In a letter to his family written in 1946, he reflected on his experience. "I was a good soldier. I aimed carefully, conserved ammunition, followed doctrine. But the Americans didn't need to be careful. They had rifles that fired continuously. They had so many bullets they could waste them. I heard that ping thousands of times, the sound of their empty clips ejecting. I learned to fear that sound more than artillery. It meant they had just fired 8 rounds, and in 2 seconds they'd be firing 8 more. We could not win against such abundance." That abundance, that willingness to equip every soldier with the finest rifle possible, regardless of cost, defined the American approach to war. While Germany calculated how few bullets each soldier needed, America calculated how to give each soldier unlimited firepower. The M1 Garand was the embodiment of that philosophy. It wasn't the cheapest rifle. It wasn't the simplest, but it was the most effective. And America built 6 million of them.
In the end, the story of the M1 Garand is not just about a rifle. It's about the collision of 2 different philosophies of war. The German military believed in the supremacy of the soldier, that superior training, discipline, and tactical skill could overcome material disadvantages. They equipped their infantry with bolt-action rifles because doctrine emphasized marksmanship over rate of fire. They believed 5 well-aimed shots were better than 8 rapid shots. The American military believed in the supremacy of the system, that superior equipment produced in overwhelming quantities would multiply the effectiveness of average soldiers. They equipped their infantry with semi-automatic rifles because they understood that in combat, the soldier who fires more rounds first usually wins. History proved the Americans right. By May 1945, when Germany surrendered, Wehrmacht soldiers had faced the M1 Garand across every battlefield, from Normandy to the Elbe River. They had learned that tactical brilliance couldn't overcome firepower disadvantage. They had learned that courage couldn't stop bullets. They had learned that the ping of an ejecting M1 clip was the sound of American industrial democracy defeating authoritarian militarism. The German military had laughed at American weapons in 1941, called them wasteful, excessive, typical American inefficiency. By 1945, no one was laughing. German veterans who survived the war spoke of the M1 Garand with respect bordering on awe. They had faced the weapon in combat and understood what it represented, not just a rifle, but an entire industrial civilization mobilized for total war. John Garand, the quiet Canadian immigrant who designed the rifle, never received royalties for his invention. He worked on a government salary at Springfield Armory and turned over his patents to the United States military. When asked if he regretted not profiting from a weapon that was produced 6 million times, Garand simply said, "I designed it to protect American soldiers. If it did that, I'm satisfied." It did more than protect American soldiers. It gave them an advantage that helped win the war. Today, more than 80 years after its introduction, the M1 Garand remains a symbol of American military innovation and industrial might. Museums display them. Collectors prize them. Veterans remember them. But the rifle's true legacy isn't in museums or collections. It's in the thousands of firefights where American soldiers faced German infantry and won because they could fire 8 rounds before their opponents could fire 3. It's in the sound, that distinctive metallic ping that echoed across European battlefields and struck fear into enemy soldiers who learned too late what it meant. It's in the admission of German generals who acknowledged after the war that the finest battle implement they had ever faced was an American semi-automatic rifle designed by a man who never served in combat. The M1 Garand didn't win World War II alone. No single weapon could. But it gave American infantry a decisive advantage in the most fundamental form of combat. One rifleman facing another across a battlefield. And in that contest, the German infantry never expected to be dominated, never expected to be outgunned, never expected that every single American soldier would carry a weapon superior to anything in the Wehrmacht's arsenal. They learned differently with every metallic ping that echoed across the killing fields of Europe. The greatest battle implement ever devised had spoken, and the sound was victory.